All right, we're going to press on, and I realize that this is a lot of information, and so people have been asking about the PowerPoints, and they will be available to you, as well as a Word doc that is going to be formatted a little bit differently. But we want this to be a clinical resource for you guys to flip through, and you know how you have to make those decisions in about 5 minutes. So that'll be available through a Time to Heal's website. Get to that.
You have to do the rest of the channels.
I have to do the rest of the channels. I know. In 2 hours. You ready? It's daunting. It's daunting. So we're on slide 90. We got 410 to go. We'll get to what we get to, and then we'll go from there. All right. So, ZIA2 regulates the water passages, so it clears lymphatic congestion. In humans, you can have lymphatic congestion contributing to hypertension, acid reflux, and headaches. In the feline, it's difficulty with the metal function. And so we're always worried about cats in asthma or coughing, chronic regurgitation or a famotidine deficiency, constipation, which is a laxatone deficiency, dampness lying at the root. And so if you don't really address these things at a fundamental level with nutrition and harmonious relationships, you know, you're going to be in trouble later on down the line if you just sort of cover these things over. So this is a point prescription basically to tonify the spleen and drain damp heat. And lung 7 is a part of it because of this ability to regulate the water passageways. And so San Ren Tong, if you don't have this on your shelf and you see cats, get some of this on your shelf, because you can treat so many cat problems with this one formula. It tastes really bland, just a little bit salty, but pretty bland. And if you introduce it slowly in cat food, they will take it. And this has been by far the single most useful cat formula that I've used in the last decade. So reinforces the descending metal function of the lung, stomach, and large intestine. These organs are lying along the lung channel. Okay. So Bai Doko, or cardamom, warms the spleen qi. Bladder 25, Hua Shu, clears out some damp heat from not only the large intestine, but also the urinary bladder if you need to. Stomach 40, that Huopo, magnolia bark, and Pinellia descend phlegm stagnation. So if you have phlegm stagnation in that stomach, right? Spleen 9 drains damp heat, like that tetrapanax pith that's in there, and the Hua Shu again, the talc. And then Yi Ren, or koi seed, the apricot seed, and the lopatharum all regulate these water passageways. So it descends qi properly through the 3 burners with the 8 ingredients to address spleen qi deficiency, leading to that dampness and phlegm obstruction, manifesting in the lung, stomach, urinary tract, and the colon. And it's not only effective in cats, but also little phlegmy dogs too. Or large phlegmy dogs, for that matter. But it's a very effective formula. Easy to give. All right, so San Ren Tong, there's those 8 herbs. We won't belabor them anymore. We'll just move on. Oh, and it treats psycho-emotional disorders as well, but those don't really happen that often in cats. So it's interesting, right? It's how do you address the stomach function, and so much of the stomach function in cats is stuffed up by liver qi stagnation, right? It's you go away on a trip, your cat's liver qi goes into hyperdrive. How many cats are living in non-harmonious relationships with other cats, and we don't realize it until cat number 2 passes away, and cat number 1's like, woohoo! Yeah, they're flourishing, right? So a lot of repressed emotion there. Lung 9, Tai Yuan, Supreme Abyss. And it's located on the medial end of the transverse crease of the carpus on the medial side of the radial artery. It refers to, the name Tai Yuan refers to great, big, or heaven, and the hua is slippery or lubrication. So things that are flowing well or where dampness is inhibiting smooth flow and needs to be unblocked. Most of the time, though, you're going to be using this point to tonify the lung, not so much to remove dampness and obstruction. It's the source of the upper heavenly water. If there's too much metallic edginess, use this point to connect to the source and allow one to breathe well. Think about that connection between heaven and earth, soul and body, source of peace. On the left side, you're oftentimes treating the heart. On the right, you're treating the lung. So if you treat this point bilaterally, you're connecting those two very critical organs for peace and harmony. If you have lung qi deficiency, shallow breathing, anemia, pallor, weakness with a hoarse bark, a soft meow, and they're immunocompromised. Again, remember that the lung is in charge of sending resources to the periphery. And if it's not functioning well, the individual will be immunocompromised. Bu Fei Tong. Bu means tonify, Fei means lung, and Tong is decoction. Tonify the lung decoction. It has qi tonics, ginseng and astragalus, blood and yin tonics, Rehmannia, antitussives, aster root and mulberry, and an astringent in there in Schisandra. So think about the spleen 3, which is the spleen source point. If you're getting a good pulse response to that, you're using astragalus and ginseng. If you're tonifying with bladder 20, you're tonifying the spleen. Kidney 3, Shuti Wang. Okay, that's, when Shuti Wang is in the formula, prepared Rehmannia, it's an extremely sweet tasting herb, and that's going to nourish the yin very well. Bladder 15 is a tonifying heart, and so you sort of think about Schisandra with heart-blood astringing or tonification. And of course, lung 9. And lung 9, we're improving the function of the lung, cutting back on coughing with aster root and mulberry root peel. I love that, right? It's not just the mulberry root. We're going to have someone peel the casing off of that root, grind it up. Fascinating, right? That's what functions there. All right, patient will often appear both dry, yin deficient, and low in energy, qi deficient. I found that huskies oftentimes are lung, yin, and qi deficient. And I had this one case with ciliary dyskinesia that responded very well to this. The dog could not get pathogenic phlegm accumulations, western phlegm, out of the body. Very difficult. We put this dog on Bu Fei Tong, and the infection rate went way down. Much better quality of life. Lung yin deficiency, moving on. Overall yin deficient, dry, thin, hot, agitated. There's dry coat, brittle hairs, a red tongue, not enough yin, of course. Throat irritation, okay? Maybe stretching the neck out. This is something that you're going to be told, you're going to be hearing of in clients because their dog is either eating a lot of grass because they have a lot of stomach yin deficiency, or they're stretching their neck out. That's sort of that deficiency yin phlegm. Cough with scanty sputum. Any day I can say scanty sputum is a good day. So, Bai He Gu Jin Tong, or lily bulb decoction to preserve the metal. Yin tonics, Ophiopagon and lily bulb. All right. We have blood tonics, Rehmannia, Angelica, and Peony. Blood cooling herbs in fresh Rehmannia and Scrophularia. Antitussives in the fritillaria. It's also fun to say. Platycodone and harmonizing with licorice root. So if you're looking at Xuanshen and Shendiwan, that Scrophularia and fresh Rehmannia, you're tonifying that with bladder 17. Mai Mendong or Ophiopagon and lily bulb are directly lung yin tonics. Prepared Rehmannia, Angelica, and white peony are blood tonics. Kidney 3, the mother kidney, the mother of blood, the source point of the kidney, tonifying those. All right, so that's that formula there, and we won't belabor it. And so this lily bulb decoction to preserve the metal, right, is you're all in tonifying yin. And so it's great when you hit it, and if you uncover some interior dampness, this is the face that you have when your technician says that the dog had diarrhea all over the white carpet. So you just have to be sure that this dog is really dry, and furthermore that you don't prescribe this formula maybe right as you're getting a lot of humid, wet weather, because sometimes that can throw a little monkey wrench into the plans. So if you do cause too much dampness, if you inadvertently cause too much moisture in a patient with lily bulb decoction, then you can use my Mendong Tong or Ophiopagon decoction, which, as you can see, has Pinellia in there that drains damp, and ginseng in there. Ophiopagon is still there, but you don't have all of that moistening tonic that the lily bulb decoction has. So this is sort of a nice middle ground, if you will, between sort of lung qi and yin deficiency. All right, so if you're using lung 9 in a patient that has a little bit of lung qi deficiency with some dampness, you can use this to restore the hua, or the slipperiness, or I'm sorry, the opposite of that. You can take some of that slipperiness out of there and address cough, nausea, vomiting, and poor appetite. And you would do that with Lu Junzi Tong. Lu Junzi Tong, the Junzi are the gentlemen, and obviously very patriarchal society there. So they're not going to talk about the women that are solving the problems because they're hidden, but the gentlemen are the literati that are out in society solving problems. So to name a formula, the 6 gentlemen, is a way of saying all of these ministers that solve these fundamental serious problems in the microcosm, in the macrocosm of our government, and the microcosm of the human body. So the Qi tonics: ginseng, licorice root, atractylodes, and poria, phlegm movers, citrus, and Pinellia. They're damp draining herbs: poria, atractylodes, and Pinellia. So bladder 20, you're tonifying that spleen qi with the 3 of the 4 gents, and ginseng as well. But we'll just say that ginseng tonifies that source qi, so I put it down there. It's subjective. Stomach 40, Pinellia, and citrus peel, and of course tonifying spleen qi with spleen 6. So qi deficiency signs with a lot of phlegm, you're thinking about Lu Junzi Tong. With some phlegm, with a lot of phlegm, you're thinking about Air Chen Tong. With blood deficiency, you're thinking about Buffet Tong. If you have yin deficiency signs, you're thinking about Baihe Gujin Tong, that lily bulb decoction, and maybe qi deficiency, then Mai Men Dan Tong. So that's sort of the way I think about lung qi tonic formulas arrayed in that spectrum. Excess symptoms, we're not going to belabor it, but we've already talked about agitation, aggression, disturbed shen, and heat, and that wiry, slippery pulse. So sedation of lung 9 on the left is associated with the heart. On the right, it's the lung. On the left, it's the heart. And so that could lead to the use of a formula Wen Dan Tong, right? And Wen Dan Tong with Coptis modifications. All right, so we're moving on to the large intestine channel, and it's the story of the rising sun. Okay, so the song, "Here Comes the Colon." We've all sung it in the morning. It was John Lennon's first draft. If Paul McCartney can sing Scrambled Eggs for Yesterday, then I guess he can sing it. All right, but here's the channel, basically, the pathway. And so we see that it goes up the outside of the arm. And so the sun is catching that. And the internal channel is traveling down to the lower He point of stomach 37. And look at the channels that it, or the organs that it traverses through. So before we trace the pathway, we'll talk a little bit about symbolism. If the lung hexagram was equal parts yang and yin, that was lovely. then hexagram 34 is more yang than yin. So 4 solid bars and 2 separated bars of yin. And that's to say that we have yang is starting to dominate now a little bit, right? So we have a little bit of constraint by yin, but it's really starting to roll here. Great power. So a rising sun, and the symbol of the large intestine is the rabbit. Think about what the rabbit is capable of doing. It's capable of proliferating rapidly. Teenagers, sort of breaking away from their, what's that? Oh boy, yes. And sort of this notion that they're going to break away from their parents and say, I know what to do, you know. Strength, think about these images. And so if you're traveling from winter solstice to summer solstice, Heiner Fruhoff makes this point that at some point there's a quick turn. And if you think about how a rabbit runs, the other part of a rabbit is it has to in order to survive, it has to be a little shifty, a little tricky. And so it's kind of, you've all driven down the road behind a rabbit and they're darting all over the place and you're hoping that they make the right decision before you catch up with them, but that's a very useful way to evade a predator. But in the pathological form, that shiftiness, if it impacts behavior too much, can be a bad thing. Production. But what about large intestine pathology? Well, greed, dictators, exploitation, explosive growth, these rabbit scourges, if you will, plagues, I should say, and yang ming inflammation, right, coming up into the mouth and the nose, this inflammation. What time are we talking about? We're talking about early morning, 5 to 7 a.m., dawn. In nature, there's the early signs of spring, the crocuses. And if we think about the Taiji symbol now, we're starting to get into the throat of this exponential growth curve. And so I always, in the early years of holistic practice, I always would come home and talk to Therese and say, I hate being a holistic vet in the springtime because I can't get a handle on all this inflammation and it really is driving me nuts. And as we've gotten more and more of our clients on whole food diets, it's been able to temper that explosive growth that you just can't handle otherwise. There's a reason why April, late March, April, and May is so busy in our veterinary clinics is because of this yang ming explosion of energy. And so you have to set people up with the right nutrition, the animals with the right nutrition a season in advance so that they can make that transition well. So trees are starting to bud out. And large intestine channel is about mobilizing reserves or a call to action. And if you think about this finger, if I point to you, you don't really like it. It's a strong action, and it's really about the start of that very yang expression there. Tip of the finger is called Shangyang or large intestine 1, and there's a lot of power in that gesture, which is why Uncle Sam's image to enlist is powerful. It's the opposite time of the kidney. So the large intestine, 5 to 7 a.m. Think about the kidney, 5 to 7 p.m., and the kidney is about storage, whereas the large intestine function is this outgoing and it's about production. We talked about the lung channel, which is on the inside, hidden from sun to remain moist. And parallel in nature is that the moisture that's gathered in the wintertime is now present to promote spring growth. So the large intestine channel is now gathering that sunlight and growth is starting to occur, catching the sunshine. It's not in full sun like the Taiyang, the channel's on the outside or on the back, but it is catching a fair amount of sun. The next 3 months, March, April, and May, will experience this explosive growth. It's amazing to see it happen. Always looking at the tree right outside my exam rooms and pointing to them. And I said, in 6 weeks, that tree will be fully leafed out, and it's just an amazing progression to see. 20 points in the large intestine channel. A lot of the first points, right, have the sun radical and a lot of the second 10 contain the moon radical. So like the lung was talking about heaven and then earth, now we're talking about gathering the sun and maybe like a little bit of a cooler influence. And so you can see how these transporting points are very effective at managing that energy. Primary channel begins at the radial aspect of the second digit, and it passes medial to lateral, traveling through the lateral elbow, large intestine 11, and then lateral, large intestine 14. Passes through the small intestine 12 to governing vessel 14. This is something that I didn't realize until recently, that actually that large intestine channel does loop up and zips up to the midline right there at governing vessel 14. It makes a lot of sense, right? If you're trying to clear out that Yang-Ming heat, governing vessel 14 is a huge venting point for the body. An internal branch descends through stomach 12. Stomach 12 is right above the clavicle in people and connects with the lung and large intestine organs, then proceeds down to stomach 37. So by needling stomach 37, you influence the large intestine channel and the large intestine organ. And the main branch passes through the neck, the cheek, and the lower gums and connects to stomach 4 at the lip commissure. So recall that it does sweep over to the chin and then it sweeps around the mouth. So it connects with the stomach channel right there at the commissure, and then it crosses to the governing vessel and over to the other side. Crosses the opposite side of the face through the Dumai, the governing vessel 26, and meets the stomach channel at large intestine 20. So those two Yang-Ming channels obviously linked. Well, let's start with large intestine 4, He-Gu, or joining valley, and it's in the depression between the first and second metacarpal bones, approximately in the middle of the second metacarpal bone on the radial side. So there it is on Mr. Blue. And Gu refers to valley, or the creation of life within a valley. So think about a valley coming to life in the spring. Also means granary, as in Gucci. We're all familiar with that, so it's a reference to grain. He, joining, compacting, shutting down. So interpretations could be joining valley, or as a geographical reference. Think about where it's located here, right? It's a joining valley between these two bony prominences. Could be seen as shutting down the creation of life, cooling down this exponential rise of energy, shutting up someone's mouth or a gate, right? If you have someone that has this sort of this arrogance and is continuing to talk. Mouth of a tiger is another translation, and that's really referring to danger. Maybe danger of a difficult labor. Large intestine 4 is oftentimes used to induce labor. So you get someone through it, you get a woman through a jam, you get a female through a jam, or Yang-Ming disease. That's also a dangerous situation. A lot of the Wenbing warm febrile diseases, these Yang-Ming explosions, and they just lost a lot of people to these contagions, and so they're using a lot of large intestine 4 as a way to try to cool that energy down. Shut the gate, used to treat diarrhea and also diarrhea of the mouth. Mouth of the tiger, induce labor. Dental pain, right? Remember that all of that that mandibular pain can be eased if you treat large intestine 4 concurrently with your dental procedures. Let some of that energy out. Could also mean compact the grains, literally to create a stool with the right amount of heat. All right, it's a general reference to helping to produce. He also means harmony and peace. So if you can find harmony between heaven and humanity, harmonizing with the one of the universe and not go it alone as ego would have us do. He-Gu treats Yang-Ming disease, heating up, hypertension, constipation, crazy thoughts. Right now, it sort of feels a little tenuous out there, right? So our world is warming up a little bit, and Earth has a bit of a Yang-Ming issue going on. Source point of the large intestine, command point of the face, another heavenly star point, and it regulates defensive and Wei Qi. So it can expel wind and release the exterior, regulates the face, eyes, nose, mouth. It's a command point for the face, but a lesser extent to the ears. Even though it connects with the stomach and the stomach goes up right in front of the ears, you have all of that gallbladder, small intestine, triple heater that enters into the ear, and those points would be better to treat ear problems. Activates the channel to relieve pain and induces labor. Restores the yang. So that's bidirectional, right? You could put some more energy in there if you had to. Here's Minu. Regulates the Wei Qi, expels wind, vents the exterior, and a master command point of the face. Well, if you had a problem with nasal congestion from spleen qi deficiency leading to dampness generation and a wind damp invasion, you'd want to try to vent that out of that channel somehow. And so if you have this creamy discharge in the nose, you're looking for something aromatic to give to a cat. Cats love aromatic things. No, they don't. So you sometimes have to find tablets or capsules to give them. But this is a great little formula. Xanthium powder, Tong'erzi, Xanthium Xinyi or magnolia flower, bohe, mint, and then that fragrant angelica. So it's an extremely aromatic moving formula to vent that inflammation. But it doesn't supply any qi tonic. So you might have to combine that with some sort of a qi tonic. Tonification versus sedation. It may be a matter of how much wind cold versus wind heat is involved in the patient. As we talked about, large intestine 4, like any point, if you're dealing with a lot of heat, you're going to be sedating that. We'll talk about a cooling version of Tong'erzi Tong for those hot cats versus maybe a slightly neutral or warming version. Acute throat and or eye inflammation. Again, you're thinking about that bladder 12 because the large intestine goes right up there and connects with that, and that is such an important point to address a high floating pulse. And so that Songju Yin, Yin Chao San combination, mulberry leaf and chrysanthemum, plus honeysuckle and forsythia powder. Commercial preparations for that if you have that sore throat and eye inflammation. So wind heat invading the respiratory tract. Maybe the third eyelid is up, they're sneezing, a hoarseness to the vocalizations. Viral etiology, cat outdoors, bad weather. Why not just use antibiotic? Well, if it's viral, it's not going to be that effective. Or if it is effective, you're just using it for a cooling action, right? What you're trying to do is make sure that a pathogen doesn't set up shop in the body. So sometimes we get pretty clear signals when a pathogen arrives and starts to cause disease. But if the pathogen is partly expelled, but penetrates farther, it's going to start to wreak havoc in the body, right? So by using these aromatic compounds at the time of initial presentation, what you're doing is you're venting that out, and you're making sure that these chronic pathogenic wind invasions or these viral particles, however you want to look at it from your different perspectives, don't continue to wreak havoc. Regulates defensive qi, and the large intestine 4 and kidney 7 are very important for regulating sweating in people. And then small intestine 3 regulates the dumai. Stomach 36 and CV and conception vessel 6 powerfully tonify qi. So if you're getting the sense that you are ventilating some pathogenic energy out of the body, but you need some qi tonification, or qi tonification is helping the pulse, then you can combine Tong'erzi Tong with Yuping Fangsan or Jade Wind Screen Decoction, or you could use Jade Wind Screen Decoction on its own. It's 3 herbs. It's astragalus, atraculodes, and sila root, and it tonifies spleen and lung qi, regulates the pores, and expels wind, but not a strong effect with wind expellent. So if you're in the throes, your patient's in the throes of an infectious disease, you want to reach for something that is more aggressively anti-inflammatory than this. This is more about a general immune tonic in between episodes of respiratory disease or at the very start of light respiratory disease. However, if you have discoid lupus, Yuping Feng San can be combined with Angelica beverage very effectively to, over time, slowly, improve that lung yin and qi, that defensive qi to fend that off. That's jade windscreen powder, which we just talked about. Astragalus, it regulates the pores, attractabilities to tonify the qi, spleen qi, and then Lediborelia or Siler root, Feng Feng, which has this wind expellent action. What about Yang Ming heat expressed in the gums? Well, there's been a lot of discussion about other therapies that could be very effective for that. Certainly, I've found whole food diets to be very effective for this, but sometimes not enough. You're clearing heat from the stomach channel, large intestine 11, large intestine 4, those are all heat clearing points. Bladder 21 is the stomach shu or association. And then stomach 44, down here, you're grasping that yang energy and you're pulling it out of the body. So if you're using those points to good effect, then you're looking for a cooling formula. If that patient's very yin deficient, which may be the case a little bit more in dogs than cats in my experience, then maybe you're using jade lady decoction or jade woman decoction. If there's more dampness and heat, you're using something that detoxifies and clears out a lot of damp heat, Hoxie-like formula. And if it's somewhere in the middle, maybe you're using Qing Wei San, clear the stomach powder. That belongs to the family of formulas that are organ-centric, and so Wei is the stomach, Qing is clear, San is powder. So basically there's a little bit of an array depending on what you need to do. And if you look at those formulas, you say, well, this is really about, Jade Woman is about cooling but not injuring any fluids. Now, clear the stomach's got coptis, which is quite bitter, and it would injure fluids if it's not offset by fresh Romania and peony tree bark and Angelica. And then this is pretty much all in with just clearing heat, and so you want to be checking in on that patient, make sure you don't dry them out too much over time. And then large intestine 4 and liver 3 are part of the 4 gates, this combination, right, bilaterally. And the 4 gates are known to calm internal wind, reduce pain and spasm, and activate qi and blood. And a formula that does clear internal wind and calm down an agitated nervous system is called Tian Ma Gu Teng Yin, or Gastrodia and Ulceria combination. It reduces spastic tendons and ligaments. It's used a lot for idiopathic vestibular disease and epilepsy. We use it a ton for anxiety. So travel phobia, thunder phobia, sound, fireworks, things of that sort. People coming on over. Sudden hearing or vision loss, including tinnitus or retinal detachment. We've partially reattached some retinas with this. And I keep picking on these pug dogs, but they get detached retinas a lot. And so if you jump in there with this formula early, that can be very helpful. And you're clearing some heat out of there, maybe governing vessel 14 and 20. All right. So Tian Ma Gu Teng Yin, it's used for these manifestations of liver yang uprising, kidney and liver yin deficiency signs, and it's 11 herbs and spices, 6 that are cooling and 5 that are more nourishing. All right, Gastrodia, Ulceria, and Haliotis shell. Again, indicated by governing vessel 14 and governing vessel 20, just releasing some of that heat, as well as large intestine 4. And Scutellaria, Gardenia, and Leonuris support these effects with an added vasodilatory effect, helpful for the cardiovascular system. Sciathula, Eucomia, and Loranthus are very commonly paired in Chinese medicine to improve the health of spastic tendons and ligaments. So this is really an interesting formula because it has It was designed in 1950, so it's just but a babe, but it really has more biomedical research behind it to address this dynamic of this yang rising and then the need to support the lower half of the body. So you think about large intestine 4 as clearing this yang ming heat, and you think about liver 3 as tonifying blood for the tendons. Now you can sedate both of those points if that patient's really hot, and maybe there's a modulatory effect where you tonify one and sedate the other. All right, large intestine 11 is Chu-Chir, or pool at the crook, and it's in the deep depression of the transverse cubital crease, just cranial of the lateral epicondyle of the humerus between the extensor carpi radialis and the common digital extensor muscle. And it's oftentimes used if people feel wronged or there's some crooked behavior. But it's important to realize that this is where the water gathers. So it's oftentimes about accumulation or bringing to a stop. So if you put those things together, you say, well, it's used to put a stop to crooked behavior, reining in greed and corruption. It's a heavenly star point, as well as that He earth point of the large intestine channel. Clears damp heat and eliminates wind, activates the chi and blood. Okay, resolves vomiting and diarrhea, and it activates the channel and alleviates pain. So, if that patient's hot, we've talked about Hoxie-like formula. If they're maybe lukewarm, you could use a formula called modified Wei Ling Tong to eliminate wind and harmonize the stomach with 5 herbs and poria. That's very good for mild yang ming heat that is manifesting also in the skin. And if they're somewhere in the middle, a formula called Xiao Feng San, or eliminate wind powder, could be used. Xiao Feng San is used very frequently in human medicine to address skin inflammation, very effective for eczema and for people. It just is, it can be effective for dogs as well. The breakdown being that Xiao Feng San, or eliminate wind powder, has a stronger heat clearing action than Chu-Shi Wei Ling Tong, and it has just a little bit of direct blood tonification, strong wind itch. So for that function where large intestine 11 is getting you a good pulse response and there's skin inflammation, that formula could be a good choice. If you're looking to clear heat from just an excessively hot patient, right, that has a lot of yang ming heat, as evidenced by a ton of grass and dirt ingestion, heat stress, sort of manic behavior, keep this formula in mind. It's oftentimes a rescue formula. It's called Bai Hu Tong, or white tiger decoction. It's very simple. It just has gypsum, Anna Morena, rice, and licorice in there. And it has a big whopping dose of gypsum. Gypsum can be extremely cooling to the digestion, and if you overdo it, that appetite goes away quickly. So you want to make sure not to leave a patient on this for too long. But if they're in the throes of this yang ming rising up, which happens not only in the spring, but this time of the year, right? We have a lot of patients that are experiencing a lot of protracted yang ming heat. If we get an extended Indian summer where October and especially early November are hot, a lot of patients cannot take that extended heat and they start to really get pretty agitated. This is a formula to consider because it clears heat, but it preserves fluids in the body. Gypsum and Anna Morena are another pair of aces. This phrase that I keep referring to, because they pair these herbs in Chinese medicine again and again. They clear heat, but they preserve fluids. So if you have heat-stressed grass, dirt ingestion, and the 4 bigs, a big pulse, big thirst, big sweat, and big fever, this formula could be for your patient. All right, so same sort of point combinations, you're getting the gist. We've thrown in there heart 9, maybe to reduce some agitated spirit. Again, that's that Jing well point, Jing points used so commonly in horses because they're such yang creatures, right? They wear a lot of their yang on their exterior because they're prey by nature and they can't relax completely. So that's why horses just respond so well to Jing well points. We may not consider using Jing well points as much in cats and dogs, but if you get these little hand needles, you can. You can certainly insert those quickly, and they can be quite effective. Well, large intestine 11 also regulates qi and blood to treat vomiting and food stagnation. And so we have Boho Wan, preserve harmony, and this is a great formula to be aware of. You may not use it that frequently, but it's really good for food stagnation resulting in megaesophagus. So you have that great pairing of shanja, the cretaceous, and fermented leaven, radish seed, pinellia, and citrus peel, again, those phlegm movers. And forsythia was used a lot for food poisoning, right? It had that antibiotic effect. It was also very cooling, and so it found its way into this formula to address that. So those are a couple suggested points. When you think about the alarm point for the large intestine, stomach 25, the alarm point for the stomach, this has just a tremendous effect on the gastrointestinal system in general. CV6, if you get the sense that you have to tonify some qi in there, you can certainly use that. PC6, pericardium 6 for nausea, and our large intestine 11. So megaesophagus, belching, burping, vomiting, regurgitation, bloating. I oftentimes think about the NyQuil ad with this. It's the belching, burping, vomiting, and regurgitation bloating medicine. So you can eat. And you know, I call this esophago. I guess you could call Boho Wan esophago, but the FDA doesn't like certain claims. So anyway, but it's really, it may not be necessary for long term to get that esophagus moving, and then you can taper it down and maybe use herbs for the underlying cause of the megaesophagus. But had very good success with that. Just belly chair be gone. Activates the channel and alleviates pain, and we've talked about this combination before, so we won't belabor it. That point combination we've talked about before, so we'll zip through that. But we'll get to Jian Yu, or shoulder bone, and this is the meeting point of the large intestine channel with the yang motility channel along gallbladder 20, large intestine 15, gallbladder 29, and bladder 62. It's in the depression craniodistal to the acromion and cranial to the acromial head of the deltoideus muscle. And the pictograph is talking about a shoulder or two shoulder, or establishing firmness or stability. And for you, it's talking about a bone to protrude. It's a reference to the distant mountains of sunrise called the Kongtong Mountains. And so we have this moon radical, which is really talking about the flesh and the bone. And so on a very physical level, oh, I'm sorry, back up for a second. The point just more proximal to it is large intestine 16 called Zhugu, giant bone. And there's a story in Chinese history about Confucius being brought a large dinosaur bone and him saying, "These are the bones of Feng Feng, master of the Kongtong region." And so Feng Feng has this lore, but Feng Feng is actually the word for siler root. So siler root is used a lot for pain in the joints. So again, you have this sort of this cultural reference to this mythical ruler, but it's referencing a real life solution. These are the beautiful Kongtong Mountains where the monastery is, and it's in that northwest area of China. And if you're tonifying large intestine 15, you may find that you're reducing a wiry pulse, and that could be ameliorating localized pain due to blood stasis, or maybe if you're withdrawing on that point, you could be addressing some wind, damp, cold invasion. So there would be some shoulder and elbow pain, frozen shoulder, chronic OCD lesions, elbow arthritis, qi and blood deficiency, And this formula called Wan Bi Tong, or remove obstruction decoction, could be very, very useful for that. Similarly, if you had involvement of the back with chronic back pain from a wind cold invasion in a blood and qi deficient patient that's oftentimes older and maybe weaker with knee, hip, and spinal arthritis with significant muscle spasm, you might use the formula Du Ho Zhi Sheng Tong, pubescent angelica and loranthus combination. Du Ho Zhi Sheng Tong, authored by Sun Simiao, his most famous formula. One formula on the left contains 7 herbs, so you're sort of hitting the nail on the head for shoulder and neck pain, that Wan Bi Tong. It tonifies qi and blood, relaxes spasm because it has both peony and licorice root in there. It has the qi tonics astragalus, and it has the wind expellents noda pterygium and psyllar root. And on the right, you've got 16 herbs. It's a lot. But it basically tonifies blood, it expels wind, it tonifies yang, so you get the distinct feeling that the patient is more yang deficient, and you're relaxing tendons and tonifying qi. All right. So you could also treat these points, triple heater 5, which is the master point of the neck. You're going to get some good resolution there. Small intestine 9, which is good for a lot of triceps muscle spasm, and then that bladder 12, which is the wind expellant action there. All right. Du Ho Zhi Sheng Tong, by contrast, you might see a good pulse response to bladder 40 because you're clearing that whole Tai-Yang surface. And it's that wiry pulse in a deficient patient that kind of throws you a little bit, right? Because you're seeing this older kidney yang deficient patient, you're saying, this pulse is uncharacteristically strong. You're saying there's a pathogenic influence in that channel. So if you alleviate that, but you're getting a good pulse broadening effect afterwards with kidney 3, then you're thinking about Du Ho Zhi Sheng Tong. That's shoulder bone. And then there's a formula in the middle between those two things called Yi Ren Tong, or koi seed combination, that could be considered if there's a little bit more dampness in the patient than what Wan Bi Tong will address. Lastly, for this point, we'll just mention Shen Tong Zhu Yu Tong, which is from Wang Qing Ren from the 18th century, and that's drive stasis out of a painful body. If you're tonifying that point, moving blood and through that shoulder, it could be very useful to treat osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, immune-mediated polyarthritis, sciatica, painful hindquarters, etc. But definitely, I've had good success treating blood stasis patterns in the forelimb with this. So whereas Wan Bi Tong is for a wind cold invasion affecting the neck on into that, maybe like a frozen shoulder, a more acute pathology, Shen Tong Zhu Yu Tong is for more of a blood stagnation pattern. So liver 3 moves blood, and that's indicated for that. So that's the end of this lecture. We'll continue on the next one.
Finding your visibility in today's climate with website creation, hosting, SEO and social media management, telephone greetings and VoIP services, and online video production.